Amazon's coming into town. These luxury fashion houses, the last thing that they want to do is go help Amazon. This, I think, presents actually a great opportunity for a traditional fashion or clothing retailer to preempt or deploy their own marketplace strategy in earnest aggressively by making an acquisition in the space and then appealing to the manufacturers to work with them. So Amazon just announced that they are getting into luxury fashion. According to industry sources, Amazon will launch luxury via a concession model, starting with the US market. There's a couple other players in luxury. One is the Real Real. They've raised about $350 million. Public company, market cap of about $1.5 billion. Went public in the summer of 2019, not this year anymore. And stock's down, I don't know, about 40% from their IPO price. The other company in this space is Farfetch. Market cap of about $3 billion. And they went public 2 falls ago. This is 2018 fall. Yeah, they actually IPO'd right around a similar share price. Doesn't mean same valuation, but similar share price. And their stock is down, about 65% from where they IPO'd at. So Amazon's coming into town. The consignment model that they speak about basically means it's basically just a take rate, right? It's a consignment, like you list your piece of luxury clothing, and then the platform will take maybe 20 or 30% take rate when that product sells. It's pretty similar to how Amazon operates on their marketplace on the regular Amazon site with third-party sellers. This will probably be a separate experience from Amazon. So I could imagine this being, it could even be a separate domain. That might be a stretch, but it's certainly going to be a separate experience. You're probably not going to be able to search for all the same inventory that you could when you're in this luxury fashion department, because what you find is that a lot of these luxury designers don't want their products or their brand to be associated with cheaper brands. This was actually literally, we were just covering this yesterday about Alibaba moving into Europe, and we had multiple luxury retailers, luxury designer manufacturers, oddly enough, saying that they didn't want to list their stuff on Alibaba because it was cheap and it would hurt their brand. There's a really cool story about Farfetch and the Real Real about how they got supply initially. So the large luxury manufacturers, there's actually a decent amount of consolidation, right? LVMH, there's a lot of these luxury conglomerates. Of course, they're not ever going to agree to sell on a marketplace. The linear equivalent, e-commerce equivalent, is this company called Net-a-Porter. Net-a-Porter has done some different mergers and so on and so forth. The large players are invested into Net-a-Porter. Net-a-Porter is the linear equivalent. What does that mean? So when I buy e-commerce product, or when I buy products from a large fashion house, what you need to do is you need to agree to buy a product line, which basically means you need to agree to buy the not so hot, kind of sexy items that are just going to fly off the shelf. You need to agree to buy stuff that won't sell as well so that you can get access to the really hot selling items. So you're buying, it's kind of like how in music you used to have an album and now you just have singles. And well, they force you to buy the whole album. Even though you might only want to listen to 2 songs on the album, you got to pay for the whole thing. That is what Yoox Net-a-Porter has to basically deal with and do. They need to buy the whole product line. All that product line goes on their balance sheet for all the same reasons that we've spoken about in the past. That business model is a lot less scalable. You're going to have a lot more limited supply on the platform, less product choice, less pricing transparency, because I just bought these products for X and some stuff isn't going to sell. And the stuff that is going to sell, I need to make margin on that to cover the products that aren't selling. You follow me? It's not as strong of a business model as the marketplace model in Farfetch or the Real Real. So Amazon's coming into the space. And Who is this a big problem for? The traditional incumbent retailers, fashion retailers like a Macy's. They sell a lot of clothes, and they have sold clothes in a linear way, right? I buy a product line, but now I'm selling it in my store, and now they have e-commerce presence as well. So I think this is the time for any kind of large fashion retailer, a Macy's and elsewhere, to seriously look at buying a RealReal, a Farfetch, maybe a StockX or some of these sneaker marketplaces, but I think that's a little too niche. But there are a few of these luxury fashion marketplaces, similarly to what we were discussing about food and Grubhub and that news. There's a winner-take-all dynamic. Amazon's coming into the space. Not all the brands are going to want to agree to work directly with Amazon, but here's the problem. How did Farfetch and RealReal get their supply? It wasn't the large fashion houses, right? They want you to buy the whole line. They don't want to just sell the hottest items. The whole point is I have the hottest items, and then you have to buy the whole product line, right? That kind of breaks the fashion house's whole model. So it's the luxury boutique, independent boutique stores that are able to get inventory from the manufacturers or from distributors. And then that was actually a lot of the first producers, a lot of the first suppliers on these luxury fashion marketplaces like RealReal and Farfetch were these boutique, independent luxury fashion stores. And then they have the inventory. They are selling it through their retail store, but then they'll also put some inventory online. What do they care? It's not hurting their brand, right? They're just getting some incremental revenue. And that is the problem with fragmented markets. Believe me, the fashion retail distribution market has plenty of fragmentation. That's why you've seen these marketplaces come into existence. They're not mega multi-billion dollar companies. So there isn't one super dominant player that is, say, on its way to platform conglomerate status, which is also why I think there's a great opportunity for an acquisition by it doesn't even need to be, Macy's has Bloomingdale's, right? So they have Macy's, and then you have the more luxurious retail lines, right? All these retailers have done this themselves, where you kind of have the mainline store, and then you might have a smaller, more luxurious, complementary brand. This stuff has been done before, so it makes sense to embrace the marketplace model now. Amazon's coming into the space, which means that you're just going to have that much more leverage with supply. Because believe me, these luxury fashion houses, the last thing that they want to do is go help Amazon. They've seen this story play out. They've seen Nike leave. They've seen that this is kind of the beginning of the end if they all now pile on the Amazon bandwagon. So they want to do whatever they can to not get onto Amazon. So this, I think, presents actually a great opportunity for a traditional fashion or clothing retailer to preempt or deploy their own marketplace strategy in earnest aggressively by making an acquisition in the space and then appealing to the manufacturers to work with them rather than the big bad devil in Amazon. And I think they'll have a pretty compelling pitch, and will also be able to strengthen a RealReal, a Farfetch with their existing store distribution, with their existing buying power. And now it starts to get really interesting, where now you can actually go to a lot of these suppliers and manufacturers with a bundled strategy of, we'll buy some stuff, but we want you to put supply into the marketplace as well. You just have a much more compelling value prop with your suppliers because you also have the retail presence. So it starts to get really interesting, I think, if we see a play like that. If it's just Amazon here on their own, you don't have a big enough independent tech marketplace competitor, I think, to strongly thwart Amazon's ability to get traction or potentially be successful. They've tried this before. They've learned their lesson. We saw this with Amazon Business, where they launched Amazon Supply 5 or 6 years prior. They learned a lot from Amazon Supply. They exited Amazon Supply a couple years later. Then they launched Amazon Business. Now, that was 3 years ago. Amazon Business is now a $10, $20 billion GMV business for Amazon, growing very aggressively. And Amazon's a sharp cookie. They've learned if they're coming at this again, this better be taken seriously. And I think it should suggest to the other retail, clothing incumbents to seriously entertain going much more aggressively down a marketplace path for their own good. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.